Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe, and I'm thrilled to welcome Will Hyler to the podcast today to talk about Solaris, which had its world premiere 50 years ago in February 1972. How are we doing, Will?
I am doing fantastic, Brian. Super excited to talk about this film. Look, the last two ones that I was on for, I confidently ravaged them. Like I got into the movie and I was like, this is garbage.
You were pretty nice about Duel. You didn't ravage it.
I was eating. It was delicious. It was great. This movie, however, when you told me about it, I was like, gosh, I like this. This is my favorite genre. This is my thing. I don't know. I honestly, Brian, I'm a little intimidated, to be totally frank with you. I think because so much has been said about this movie, this genre, it's been so influential, this director. I'm a little afraid of just sort of jumping on here and just saying it's good and then being done, right? Because there's a lot to praise, but I almost feel like there's so much that's been said, it's hard to be original with a film like this. But
yeah, I mean, we could make this the shortest episode and just say, yeah, let's go check it out. Thanks for listening.
Maybe we could talk about the other films that this is influenced.
Yes,
we'll figure it out. I'm sure there's a lot.
We're definitely going to do that. But yeah, before we get into our movie Solaris today, I'd love to hear just a little bit about why you love science fiction movies. Since you were on almost a year ago now, you've been talking to me about how you've wanted to come on here for a science fiction movie. What is it about the genre that you really respond to?
Yeah, I've been lobbying hard for it and so glad that it finally happened. Look, it's been one of those loves that seems obvious from the beginning, right? It's not something that like you encounter one day as an adult or somewhere at some point in your life and there's a before and an after, right? For me, this has been my whole movie going experience. Every time I see something that's sci-fi, specifically like hard sci-fi or like science, less fantasy. And I can't explain. It's just how I am, what I am, right? I mean, I think what I really enjoy about it is the opportunity to explore what it is to be human. And man, what a good movie this one is an example of that, right? I mean, like 2001 A Space Odyssey is obviously came a little bit later, but like same kind of like perfect cake for me. I like the self-exploration. I like the idea of the vastness of sort of like shooting out into the middle of nowhere and just whatever possibly can happen.
Yeah.
What about you, dude? Is this one of your favorite genres, or is this tough to get into? Or?
Yeah. What's cool about science fiction is that there's so many kinds of science fiction movies, right? It's like sometimes doesn't have to be set in space. Sometimes it's based in our reality. Sometimes it's very quiet, intimate drama. Sometimes it's big action blockbusters. Science fiction. Like I looked yesterday, I'm like, so what are my favorite science fiction movies? And I was like looking through a list of the 100 best. And I'm like, I mean, they're so different, from Alien to Jurassic Park to Back to the Future. And I'm like,
well, you can add the Fast and the Furious franchise in there now, right? I mean, it goes all over.
I'm like, it's all over the place. So it's not the kind of genre where like sometimes like the Western, you kind of know what you're getting every time. Right. Whereas science fiction, there's all sorts of levels, which always makes it really exciting and lots of great films to discover.
Don't forget Cowboys and Aliens, right?
Cowboys and Aliens.
Mash that too in there. I mean, it's a vector for everything. You can find it in everything.
That's right. Yeah, sometimes they overlap. You get, science fiction and horror and Alien, and then you get Westerns and science fiction and Cowboys. Is it Cowboys and Aliens or versus Aliens?
Good question. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I think it's and.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is the kind of science fiction movie I really respond to, the kind of quiet character study about a relationship that in some ways, like if they had just made it like just set on Earth about this couple, it might have been interesting. But then there's this new quality, taking the science fiction genre to really process and get us close to these characters, and it makes it so much more interesting than if it were just a general drama. So let's get into the movie today. So for those who might not have seen this, at least this version, this is the first one that came out in 1972.
How many are there?
There's a remake with George Clooney.
Is that it? No TV movies?
I did my research. I did not see any like 80s miniseries or there was not a Solaris 2 in 1978 or anything like that. But here's like just the brief synopsis of the movie. So the Solaris mission has established a base on a planet that appears to host some kind of intelligence, but the details are hazy and very secret. After the mysterious demise of one of the 3 scientists on the base, the main character is sent out to replace him. He finds the station run down and the 2 remaining scientists very cold and secretive. When he encounters his wife, who has been dead for 10 years, he begins to appreciate the baffling nature of the alien intelligence. So that is really like the emotional pull of this movie, is that his wife committed suicide, right? 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Like she killed herself.
Yeah.
And she appears on this spacecraft, this mission. Yeah. And like his reaction to that and the evolution of that reaction is what makes the movie really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't want to like fast forward too far, because honestly, this element that you're talking about is like 3/4 into the movie.
It's a while.
Like,
no, it's not.
Takes
so yeah, okay.
time
So let's talk. So it's 2 hours and 47 minutes long. I did write in my notes, he arrives at the station about 43 minutes in.
I noted that too. I was like, okay, so it begins.
Yeah, there is for me, the worst part of this movie. There's like a 20-minute section at the beginning where you're just watching like this interview footage.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm all for the slow burn, but let's get things moving.
Well, they were talking, not only were they watching a pre-recorded thing, it's kind of historic tape at that point for them, but then also they do a little like FaceTime, like future prediction FaceTime in the car while he's zipping around. And he's even sitting in an Uber too. Like he's sitting in the passenger seat of a self-driving car, which isn't even made that big of a deal of. You just kind of see out of the corner, like the wheels piloting itself. And he's driving along, and there's, I don't know, very high quality camera somewhere lodged in the windshield that he's conferencing back to the people he just left. But I thought that was like a really fun little sort of like, let's not make a big deal. It's just, you know, I mean, and they're also like driving in Soviet era, like really old cars too, but they were just like, you know, design won't move forward, but technology.
Yeah, so we should tell our listeners who might not know like where this movie came. This is not an American film. This is from the Soviet Union. This was filmed in 1970, 1971. Director Andrei Tarkovsky, who is a very famous director. This might be the first film I've seen that he directed. Have you seen anything else he made? He's pretty famous for an international filmmaker.
Yeah, that's right. No, I know of him because of was it Stalker? Is that what
Stalker? Yeah, that's right. There's I believe it's 1979 Stalker. I might have seen Stalker. That sounds kind of familiar.
I haven't seen that, but I know that Annihilation, this Natalie Portman film, is pretty much a remake of that.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, because I read on one of the sites I was looking at that Stalker plays with a lot of the same themes and ideas as Solaris does. So like he took some of those ideas and explored them again.
Yeah, that's right.
So, but he's pretty famous international director. So I'm happy to finally watch this movie. I'd never seen this original. Had you seen the 72 Solaris before?
No, nor have I seen the new one, though I did watch the trailer for the new one.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. And because it was this director, I had this on my to-do list to see anyway. So I kind of started it 6 months ago and just never, and the thing is, I don't know, did you already mention this is in Russian? This is not an English film. And I think finding it online dubbed, I don't know if that's a thing. I don't know if I wouldn't want to watch it that way anyway, but honestly, sorry to like jump rails here, but speaking of dubbed, this movie feels like they dubbed their own movie, right? Like that's one of the first things you notice going into this movie is they were like, they didn't have any audio equipment to speak of when they were shooting this film, or they just said, no, I don't want to do that. That's going to be too hard. Or like there was an air conditioning running, no matter what, there was an airport nearby, and they just said, you know what, we'll just do it all in post. And they got in there and then they just re-recorded while watching the movie, little bits of, I mean, you know, it's like the voices are there, but they just added very sparse Foley in there. Every once in a while, there'd be a little plink plonk for some footsteps or some raindrops or something. But there were segments in here that were completely silent. They didn't care.
Yeah, the sound design here is interesting in that we don't get a lot of Foley. You're right. The dialogue is very sparse and there's very little music of any kind. There's like long stretches of this movie with no music at all.
I mean, there's a oppressive funeral march of organ playing in the opening and the end there. I mean, just, the whole thing feels like a very depressed, quiet sort of film.
I read somewhere that like they cut part of the movie out when they finally released it in the United States in 1976. This did not come to US theaters until 76, which is crazy. Yeah. Like this premiered in Moscow in early February 1972, and then it played at the Cannes Film Festival 1972, won an award. How did it take 4 years to get to the United States? That's really baffling to me.
Yeah, they got it on an airplane and then had to get some fuel, and the boat crossed. It took a while. Yeah.
But it was a very popular movie. It played in the USSR for 15 years. Like this, you could go find it. If you were in year 13, Will, and you're like, you know what? I haven't watched in 6 months Solaris. Oh, there it is at the local theater. Let's go.
We'll get some milk and some bread and we'll go see Solaris and we'll come home.
Can you imagine if there was a movie here that just played in theaters on a loop for 15? So let's see. That means 07.
Yeah,
there will be blood. There will be blood.
Right.
Would still be playing. You know what I haven't seen in a while. Let's go see there. It's just like a designated movie theater, like at the very back, the smallest screen, and that's just playing that one movie over and over.
Not mad. I wouldn't be mad about.
You wouldn't be mad.
No.
So this was the most mind-boggling piece of trivia I found on this movie is that. So, because I don't know about you, but this very much reminded me of 2001: A Space Odyssey, which came in early '68. So I'm like, oh, clearly he watched that. the director of this, Tarkovsky, watched the Stanley Kubrick film and was influenced by it for this. But apparently, like I think he might have watched it before he made this, but he hated 2001.
Yeah.
That's really interesting to me. Like it feels like he's kind of, at least nodding a little bit to the tone and the pace of 2001. And I mean, there are some shots that very much reminded me. I'm like, this could have been filmed right now by Kubrick. Like this.
Well, he just thought that Kubrick was moving too fast. He was like too fast paced.
Too fast.
No, I've heard
Kubrick
that too.
Slowed it down.
I've long heard about the sort of comparisons between the two. You got your capitalist American version of this sort of space, heady philosophical kind of story, and then you got your Soviet version. So the two kind of parallels there, which is really interesting, and the parallels seem clear too. But both of them are based on books, right? So I mean, they have their own source material, and obviously it's very timely and zeitgeisty at that time of the century to make a film like that. So it seems to me a little bit of a case of parallel thinking.
Yeah, so Solaris was based on the 1961 novel of the same name. Tarkovsky wanted to make this movie because he admired the book and the author, and he also needed a job.
Well, that's what it was like back then. Yeah, you just need a job. I'll be a filmmaker.
I mean, isn't that what it was like that for us? Well, you know what? It's been 3 months without a paycheck. I need a job. If I have to go direct this science fiction film, then so be it.
I'm starving. I gotta
get a job.
Come into some money quick.
Yeah. So the film he made before this was called Andrei Rublev, and apparently it never got a major release. Like it didn't do very well. And so he needed work. He also wanted to bring emotional depth to the science fiction genre. He felt like most of the movies he was watching in the genre didn't have that. Yeah. And he pinpointed 2001 as one of the examples. Like as a movie that didn't have any depth. Like what? Of all science fiction movies, like of all the crap science fiction films that came out in the 60s, like 2001 was the one he was like, he called it phony and a lifeless schema with only pretensions to truth.
So is he wrong? Is he wrong about that? How do you validate a viewpoint like that? It seems laughable because we tend to grow up in 2001 being like the height of cinema and philosophy and that kind of stuff, and then to hear a statement like that is flies in the face of it, and you just go like, "Shut up! What do you know? You're talking truth." But on some level, is he just sort of like, I don't care what audiences think. I don't care what financiers think. I'm going to do me, and me is the best. And it's like that attitude, or is there some art in there?
This strikes me as a director who didn't care what people thought of him. And like, I from what I read, like, it doesn't sound like he was praising a whole lot of films but like I read Roger Ebert's great movies review of Solaris. I guess when it came out, he was kind of so on it. He gave it 3 stars. He's like, it's okay. And then he revisited it couple decades later and wrote a really nice piece about it. And he said, he's looked at a lot of the films of this guy, and it's a director who's very cold in many of his movies and really tricky, and he takes his time, and he doesn't care if he's boring you. Like,
right. Yeah.
If the movie has to be 3 hours plus, it'll be 3 hours.
You know, it's funny when I read or you watch you want to learn anything about this movie, you dip into the internet and you're going to hear that kind of thing being said. It's a meditation, right? You go into it. He wants to put images on screen for a long time so that you're searching for meaning. And what a privilege, right? To find yourself in a situation where you can make something and the critics and the audience are working double time to make meaning out of it. You know what I mean? Like, we all do that as filmmakers. We're all just like, let me, this, I think this would be great because it'll say this and this. And you show it to an audience and they're just like, it doesn't follow the formula. It's like, it's too slow, or there's not enough sound. There's there's rules here, man. Like, you got to work within the system to tell something original. Or you're Andre and you just show up and like, here you go. And they go like, okay, all right. What did he do? Let's start off. It's brilliant. Let's start there and then figure out how. Right. I don't know. That's the way it feels sometimes. I mean, when you watch a movie like this, you like Roger Ebert. That's a good review to point out, because I think we all kind of have a similar experience, or at least I did, where you go and you watch the movie and you think like, it's too slow, it's too boring, it's like all these different things, but it does stick with you. Like, when you're done, you are thinking about it afterwards. And I think maybe that's one of the qualities that brings you back to kind of like make sense of it, or like add that sort of commentary or justification, you know what I mean, to explain why it is a brilliant film. But I don't know, I mean, I love this stuff. I'm predisposed to sort of say it's a genius, and still I'm sort of sitting there in the dark in my room on my iPad watching it, kind of wondering like, this is just bad, right? And I'm like working hard to try and prove otherwise, right? Some things I'm like, can I just say that it feels bad right now? I should be able to say it's bad. But you really do feel that tension of like, it's a brilliant film, I gotta like justify it, you know?
Oh, that's a good point. Like, when you're watching kind of a slow moving 3-hour movie and it's done with a lot of great technical precision, and it's like, and you're like, but I'm not really getting much out of it. Like, but everybody loves it. It's got an 8.0 on IMDb.
You can feel the internet jumping down your throat and be like, well, that's you. You are broken and don't know good things when you see it. So
well, that's the nature. I mean, I have to be always honest on this. I can't be like, well, most people liked it, so I gotta say I liked it too. I mean, this was the case of a movie where I really admired sections of it, but I think this movie was way too long. Like, I don't know. Like, I parts of it, I'm like, it's just so nice to like settle into just a movie that's like about behavior. And I really do take to the central idea of like, if you were to lose a loved one in a really tragic circumstance, and 10 years on, they have the ability to come back into your life. It's not really the same person. It's like a different model of who they were, but they look physically the same. Yeah. That's such an interesting idea. Yeah. So I was really taken with that, and it made the movie worth it to me to stick it to the end. Yeah. But this one's tricky. This one's tricky to like really like, versus 2001, which is very slow, but I find that movie hypnotic. Every scene of that is hypnotic to me. Yeah, I didn't find that pull in Solaris as much, even though I did admire a lot of it.
I was doing a lot of like red string charting of things on a wall, being like, okay, what? And especially I think because it's not English language film, you do have to work a little bit harder to like
you have to watch it. You have to actually look at the screen.
Yeah, and I mean, I was the thing is, I wanted to observe the images and take that in, but I had to quickly like look at the subtitles constantly, because sometimes dialogue will be going by fast, and unlike many other films, you can just pick up the gist of it as you go along. If you miss one or two subtitles, you're like, oh, okay, well, I'll figure it out here in a second. But no, like, you miss one thing, like, you're confused for a long time afterwards. I was writing quick bios and things too, going back 15 seconds, being like, oh my God, who's this person? Yeah. No, but to agree with you quickly about the central idea of the person coming back. One of the things that I really admired about this film is that it didn't do that cheap thing of being like, the person showing up and being like, well, what's the deal? You know, like, what's the problem? Like, I'm here. I don't know. I just got here. What does it matter? Instead, they were introspective and they were like, yeah, Jesus, man, this is really weird. I shouldn't be here. You know, it's like, I enjoyed taking it to a clear-eyed logical conclusion where they really would feel this like destruction of self.
Yeah.
You know, like wait a minute, I can clearly see I'm not the person that I appear to be, and that'd be ruinous to your psyche.
Yeah. And the movie takes it a step further in that she learns about his wife who died 10 years ago. And she like kind of has to reckon with that truth of like, oh, I'm a version of this other person who's already died. It's not just, they didn't just bring her back as like a ghost or something. That would have been kind of boring. Like she's actually, it's like a human being who is like, I'm not who I really am. Like, it's just such an interesting, and the way that the character has all of these different emotions. That scene where she like breaks through the door and she's all bloodied up, and he was afraid because he wasn't there. And I mean, it's playing with some really interesting ideas.
Yeah, you know, and I think we're kind of trained or accustomed to watching a movie where they the main characters have the language to and self-knowledge to describe what's going on for our benefit. Like, I'm feeling really upset when you said this made me really sad, right? And whereas this movie, it was just like, oh yeah, and you had to be like, oh yeah, he's feeling tense right now, or he's feeling scared or threatened by that. You know, they were pretty nonplussed through most of it. I mean, there were some sort of like, there's some tension. I mean, for example, like when he first saw the wife for the first time, right?
Yeah.
I was like, what is going on? He's just like, oh, hey, Hari, what's going on? And she was like, not much. What are we doing here? And he's like, come with me. Well, you know, we're gonna do some stuff. And they launches her in space and nearly gets fried himself because he's like, doesn't get out the door. And I'm, you know, that was the kind of the moment where because I was afraid that it was going to be stupid. And then when I saw that he was so anxious to slam her in there that he forgot to sort of like do the precaution to get himself out.
Yeah.
You know, in a more modern film, and maybe they do this with like the George Clooney thing, you would have seen him like sweating and nervously trying to hide. Oh no, it's okay. Get in the rocket. Everything's fine. But he was just like, no, go ahead, get in. You know, we're gonna go for a ride. And then he hits the button. Then he's just like, oh gosh, I'm on fire. This is. And then go back to his room. I don't know. I mean, I don't know which is better, but it certainly threw me watching it, being like, what is this guy feeling? You know, like throughout all of it, what are these people feeling? And you kind of had to see their actions later and then do a little bit of mental math and say, okay, well, they would do that if they were scared about this or that, and connect the dots yourself instead of have it all be transcribed to you.
Yeah, I have very vague memories of the George Clooney version. I saw it opening weekend. I remember I was very excited. It was George Clooney, Steven Soderbergh, and a science fiction movie. I didn't know about the 72 original. And I think along with most people who went to see it, like who weren't aware of the original, we were like, oh, it's not like an action movie. This is like a quiet drama. Only 90 minutes, Will.
Yeah, well, that doesn't surprise me too much.
Soderbergh did not play around with the running time.
No.
You know, this is very sad to admit, but I have to admit this. The only real part I remember from Solaris, I would have been 17 or how old when it came out. There's a shot in the movie where George Clooney is laying down on his stomach with his wife, who's now been, reincarnated or whatever.
Yeah.
Played by Natasha McElhone. I think that's how you say her last name.
Yeah.
And he's naked and you see his bare ass for like a whole 10-15 seconds as he's talking to her.
Right.
And I was like, wow.
Solaris. Got it. Yeah. No.
So if you want to see George Clooney naked, that's what I came out of that movie with. But it was a huge bomb. Didn't make much money. It kind of came and went. Yeah. And watching the original, I'm like, oh, this is why Soderbergh wanted to remake it, because of that central idea. It's so interesting.
Yeah, it is. But honestly, I thought with the twist ending at the end, right, caught me off guard because I just didn't expect that this movie even operated on that level. Right?
You're talking about the last shot.
Yeah, I thought the movie could have easily just left with him shooting back to Earth, and it would have been tonally the same. Just
right,
blah, a little slow, and then it ends. And I would have fully expected that, and then it like does that twist, and I was like, oh, oh, and it's a fairly easy twist. Like it makes total sense.
Yeah.
And as a blockbuster, an American film, like, I don't know if they twisted it at the end of the George Clooney version, but I think the expectation is probably there more, right? Because you're like, there's some action, or this is moving along. It's 90 minutes, it's tight, and you kind of are thinking ahead, going like, okay, what would really surprise me? And if someone's trying to escape something or get away from something, then the big twist would be that they're trapped in it forever or something, right? But for some reason, I was happy. It's harder and harder as you get older, right? To be surprised by
anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a movie that doesn't have a lot of really striking shots. Like the camera work, I mean, at most, like the camera might like pan.
Yeah.
There's not much.
Right.
So we get to that last shot, and it's really striking. Like it looks like it's like on a crane. It's like going up, 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 up.
Yeah.
And then it goes into a helicopter shot.
Yeah.
And then let's talk about the ending. It's very Planet of the Apes, right? Like we open down on Earth for the first 40 minutes or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you feel, and it looks like Earth, but then in the last shot, we learn that he actually never left the planet. He's still there, right?
Well, see, okay.
Isn't that, he's still on that watery planet.
But the thing is, so like before we get to that point, they're like, they use the Annihilator thing, and then the water starts to drain away and it's islands and stuff. And you're like, okay, cool. And then at the end, he's apparently on one of these islands. But I'm like, did he shoot himself to the surface? And you know what I mean? Did he choose this? He must have, because the way it felt was that he got on the ship, because we don't see him traveling at all. He's just like in one location and then another. And that
was an interesting choice too, to not show him traveling. I wonder if that was because of like budgetary reasons, if they didn't have the technology.
Right. Exactly. I mean, they did have a big rocket inside of that room. You know what I mean? They did have some modeling there, but so he's like, see you fellas, headed back home, and then he's on the island. Poof. So I have to believe that he kind of got in that rocket and said, you know what, guys, this dream is too strong, too powerful. I'm gonna steer this thing and land on this planet and just chill here. Because I don't think he was mad. Like he went in, looked at his window, there's his dad, and he goes to his dad. So he's not, unlike some of these other twist endings, when they sort of go like, wait a minute, I'm in the bad place, everyone goes like, no, and sort of you pull out and they're just like, I'm trapped, help, and it's forever lost. But he seemed to make a choice there, right?
Drops to his knees and hugs his dad, and it's a very moving final shot. He's got a dog, so it's not all bad. He'll find some joy, take his dog on a walk and all that good stuff.
I think there's a lot, you can spend a lot of time sort of looking at each one of these images and drawing a lot of connections between them at the opening and the end, and between, I mean, directly saying, we saw this shot in the beginning, now we see this shot in the end. So there's like bookend parallels there, but then also metaphorically, symbolically, you can do, I think it's like rich that way. I just don't have any interest in doing it. You know what I mean? Like in the beginning, there was that shot of him outside in the rain, looking down at a table with a half-eaten apple and a teacup and stuff. And I know later on I saw, an apple and a teacup, and I was just like, oh yeah, I bet there's like a whole college thesis sitting right there, but I haven't yet to Google it and shall never probably,
Oh yeah, and I bet that thesis is at least 20 pages, right? double spaced.
I mean, I don't know what else you're going to get from it. Like he's sad. He misses his mom. The past it holds him down. He won't. I don't know. Who knows? I mean, I'm sure there's a cultural context in there too. It's rich. I know that there's more to enjoy. But when you watch, if you're just watching a movie, you're just like, so this comes with homework. You know what I mean? I got to go home and like spend a bunch of time, and without the internet. Right? I mean, you got to imagine he made this film, and just a average person who, I don't know, lays bricks for a living, or, you know what I mean? Like works on trucks, and they just go in to see this movie once or twice a year for 13 years straight. And they just go like, love that apple part. Who knows what it means? I shall never know. But they just, I guess he thinks it works on a subconscious level or something.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm trying to take it as like, okay, let's pretend that I'm a bricklayer, and I'm just going to watch this movie and take it exactly as it imparts upon me. And maybe in the era, in that location, they would have gone like, oh yeah, that eaten apple thing, I know exactly what that means. You know, like they're in the right context for it, and I'm lost. I have to do a whole bunch of history on it. But you know, for me, watching it right now, just means nothing. Just says to me like, something really heady happening right here. Enjoy if you want to.
Yeah, the director finishes Apple, and he's like, I'm gonna put it on the table.
You know,
they're gonna be arguing about this.
This is something that I would love. Some hardworking person who desires zero monetary compensation, because I can't imagine a person who would pay for this. But
yeah,
a movie like Room 237, that movie about The Shining.
The Shining.
Yeah, but about this movie, right, where they could just, I'd love that if audio commentaries on movies just became that, where every movie they just went into the connections and the probably not every movie deserves it. This one probably does, but you know, giving me that sort of context and the connections and also the conspiracy theories, that's really nice too. I think there's a lot probably in here that way, just because it's a critique probably on the government of the time and the economic system and all that as well. And those are things that are lost on me without a history major sitting next to me, you know?
There have been some films I've watched for this podcast where I would love to have had a history major sitting on the couch explaining things to me. Like just a few weeks ago, I did an episode on Nicholas and Alexandra, which was kind of a historical epic film, a piece of history I was not that very familiar with. And it took like my guest to explain a lot of it for me to be like, oh, okay. So I do think with some of these films, you need to have at least some interest in either history or, because like thinking about the Soviet Union around 1970, like what was that? What was happening there? That probably plays a lot into this movie, which probably it makes it richer for many viewers.
Exactly. You know, and going back to my love of sci-fi, this is something that I would sit and listen to. But if you had something like a Pride and Prejudice and you had someone sitting behind your ear and sort of saying like, well, when they say this, it's really a catty thing to say because of this, I'd be like, I don't care. Don't stop talking. Immediate hard pass. But with this, I'm all about it. And I think it's because I feel like that is about most movies are sort of, you know, like human relations and stuff like that, how people deal with each other and really in specific cultural contexts and like the language differences or how you derive meaning. But when you do derive it, it's ultimately just like, I think you are stupid, right? Like that's the underlying meaning. This one though, the underlying meaning here is just like, what is it to be human? Like it's a fairy tale. Like the story you tell yourself about who you are is a fairy tale. You can slice it very thinly and see right through it. And that's, I don't know why that's super exciting to me. Like the ability to wipe away the illusion of ego and self is something that excites me. And this is the genre where I get that.
So what did you think about these actors? Like, so the lead, I'll probably butcher these names, but Donatas Banionis.
Oh, sure. I know who you're talking about and which role they played.
So the lead of this movie, the guy, Chris, like, what did you think of him as a performer? Do you think he was appropriate, the right choice for this?
Do you think that his ability to sweat was part of...
He was very sweaty.
Why they cast him?
That must have been the audition.
Sweat. He... on what level would one judge him as a performer, right? I mean, I enjoyed their stoic performances. I knew that this was a stoic film, so I mean, it's appropriate. It fits in there, and but it did feel at all times like they were just saying lines out loud, right? It didn't feel like they were like emoting and performing and sort of like conveying. It just felt like they were saying, this is disturbing to me, and I think we should kill Hari. I don't think we should kill Hari. Right?
They were doing the Marlon Brando thing where you just write down the dialogue on a piece of paper behind the camera and they just read it off the paper.
And the thing is, like, too, I think why I enjoyed it, but this is just a personal thing. I think it's just that they looked like people, right? Like just average person. They didn't feel like actors. None of them to me felt like that's the Soviet Union's George Clooney. You know what I mean? Like he saw this vehicle and said, I'm gonna crush it and it's gonna shoot me to the upper echelons of the Soviet Hollywood. I watched it and said, these look like folks that the director just opened the door to the studios and one time said, you come here. No, you're not.
They were just
gaffer
walking
anymore.
by.
You're doing this now. And I know that I looked and like they're trained, they're, had big illustrious careers, many of them. I think he had a long career doing different things. So I mean, they're obviously good performers, and I know this isn't a criticism necessarily, but that's how it felt, and I enjoyed it. But it could easily have been a turnoff, I think, to somebody.
Yeah, I have kind of like mixed feelings about it, because and sometimes I really like it when I'm watching a movie. I don't know who anybody is. It's really great. But then, but I'm also fans of a lot of movie stars, and when they do a role that's different or they're really pushing themselves, and they're able to lose themselves at least somewhat into the role, I'm not going to be like, oh, that's Brad Pitt, I'm out, I can't follow this. Like Ad Astra was a great example of taking a movie star, putting him in a space movie and doing something interesting with that character and that relationship with him and his father, played by Tommy Lee Jones, and of course Sandra Bullock in Gravity. And it's like, if Gravity had been a no-name actress in the lead role, I might have still responded to it, very highly. But because of my love for that actress, Sandra Bullock, and what she did in that movie, like for me, the movie was even richer for it. So sometimes it depends. I think Solaris is a good example of, I don't think you need a George Clooney for it to really be pulled off. Like I think having an actor like this guy, who I have no, recognition of, it helped pull me into the story a little bit better than I think Clooney did in the 2002 version. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and the story is really kind of a thin fabric on which the bulk of the experience of this movie sits, right? I mean, it's no wonder that the remake was so short. And I think honestly, if you were to discuss the ideas of this film kind of the way that we are, you can do it in 5 minutes flat. And they're pretty, I know, kind of boring to say. Like, I don't know, are you still the same person if you don't have the same memories? We've all kind of like had those discussions, and I don't know that you come away with something like, whoa, man. But when you do take those ideas and you just sort of like soak in them for a while, which, the meditation feature of this, you really can feel that existential, I don't know, it can be dread sometimes, but also the excitement of the unknown and that element of it. So, this movie was kind of like a koyaanisqatsi or something, right? Where you're meant to sort of sit there and have these images wash over you and just go like, I mean, I think the fact that it is rather slow paced is meant for every image to kind of stick with you for a while. Cause like when I think about the lake, for instance, like what was that little, I mean, outside of his house, the pond, I should say, the little pond outside,
the
like
greenery.
All those like grasses, and then it was frozen for a bit. And I'm just kind of amazed that this is stuck in my head, because it's not a character, nothing significant necessarily happened there. It was just a little place. And so I think there's a lot to be said. You have to be open to it, right? To sit there and experience that. But it is a rather sort of like straight to the veins, pure sort of emotion, feeling kind of thing, where you just sit there and get the music. Although, the thing about Space Odyssey, for instance, to keep sort of jumping around here real quick, is just that, Kubrick really had that big score, the big music that like
the
really
classical
recognizable. Yeah, exactly. All of that felt key in feeling that, with all that space stuff at the end sort of zipping by your face and whatever. Whereas this one didn't, and it was so to a much different effect. I think that it's a positive effect. It's something I really enjoy. It's a unique and enjoyable thing. But if I'm sorry, I feel weird calling it a movie, I guess is what I'm getting at, because it's like, it feels very experimental and very experiential. And the plot is just kind of there to facilitate that experience.
It is like this quiet experimental movie, Solaris, but I mean, it's not to say that the movie had no budget. I mean, in the first 40 minutes, I'm like, are we not going to go to space? Is this going to be a science fiction movie of the mind? But like when we actually get there, I mean, I wrote down twice, like really cool production design. Like it's a space that feels very old and lived in. It's not like all shiny and bright, and I feel like in 1972 that wasn't done very much, where you'd have a science fiction movie where it's got kind of a grungy feel to it, and all the weird details on the wall. Like there was just like a big poster of butterflies. I'm like, who came up with that idea? And and like the widescreen TVs, and it pointed to some things that we get now, like it like the production design, art design, all of that works really well in the movie. Once they get to space, it's really cool, and it's not just like this low budget nothing movie. Like there's a lot going on in terms of the look and the design of the set. It was really cool.
It would be criminal if we didn't mention all the mirrors, because that's kind of one of the big deal of this movie is reflection, self-reflection. Hari is a reflection of his memories, you know, all that kind of stuff. You know, but he had one of those, outside of every door was one of those round sort of supermarket, you know, funhouse mirror kind of things, distorting the image. Everywhere you look, it was often people would be introduced via mirror, right? A door would open and you sort of see them first from the reflection of something. So the production design was very conscious and careful and well done. I would love to know what your take is on those crooked monolith computers that were in the hallways. Remember how they kept traversing to that space and they disappeared in the end, right? They were sort of like opposing in a crooked, staggered way, and then they came in the end and they were gone. I don't know if those had anything to do with the Annihilator or what it was, but they were so striking that everything, you know, was very rounded or curved or felt symmetrical, and these were just like in the middle of a hallway and crooked to the center. I'm sure it's well set online, but have you any thoughts on what those are?
So if Wes Anderson were watching this movie, he would have had like an emotional breakdown, seeing that out of place. Yeah, I'm always curious, like, how does Wes Anderson watch a movie where like the camera's tilted and it's like doing this and that, and he's like, "What are you doing, man?"
Well, I feel that way too. I honestly, I do sort of I get so much pleasure out of symmetry. I see a shot that's well composed and symmetrical, and I go like, "Nice job." And you know that's fun. But the thing that the flip side of that is how irritating it is when cameras are treated as just kind of like, I just got to get the stuff in there. I just got to get the thing and the words and the stuff in there. And there's so many movies where, sure, if you're just sort of like documentary style, you're moving around or whatever, that's one thing. But there's this weird little gray space in the middle there where they'll be pointing the camera at something and you're just like, just move 5 degrees over, you know what I mean? And it's like square now, you know, or go the other way and make it intentionally not. But the fact that you're riding that middle line of like almost and not quite is really...
Do you have this experience, Will, when you're watching a movie, there'll be a shot where there's like a little something in the corner of the frame that just shouldn't be there, and the camera's like slow. I'm like, get that little white thing out, and then when it does, I go,
yes. Yes.
Or like the camera will be locked off and there'll just be like a little something in the corner. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, get that out. You know,
that is frustrating.
But we don't see a lot of movies now that'll hang on a shot for a long time. Like, you know, I mean, we see movies all the time where if we're on a shot for more than 2 seconds, it's like a miracle.
Yes, I know. Did I talk to you already about Roy Andersson? Roy Andersson, this filmmaker from, where is he from? Swedish film director.
Oh, okay.
I came across him last year sometime, and he makes painting films, right? So it's like he'll do that where he'll just literally the whole thing will take place in 3 shots, and it'll be an hour-length film or something.
An hour long, 3 shots.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably exaggerating a little bit, but you know what I mean? Like very, very, very few shots, and every one of them are composed like a painting with the actors standing in them, not moving that much. You know, they're in the shot, they're stationed in such a way that the composition is king. Like that's what the whole thing is about. And they'll deliver their lines and talk about different things. And then if they need to, they might shift and then continue the scene kind of thing. But the camera never moves, never cuts until, you know, we're on to the next painting. And I got so excited about that, mostly because it's like the polar opposite, right? Especially if something like Don't Look Up, which I think is have you seen that movie?
I watched it.
That just came out right now for us as of this recording, and it was you know, this science fiction film, right? And it was kind of meant to obviously be about climate change, and I think it's a great sort of like contrast to this film, where you know we kind of are really sort of exploring human nature and what's possible and what we can do, how collectivism and all that kind of stuff. And I am not a fan of the way that what's his name, the director of
Adam McKay.
McKay, right? I am not a fan of his frantic, cut constantly style, and I know that
can't take a breath,
but I hate it, and I hated it in this movie especially. such a difference compared to Andrei, who's just like, set it up, we're going to do a scene, we might cut once or twice, and scenes over 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, you know?
Don't Look Up by Tarkovsky. It would have just been Jennifer Lawrence looking at Leo, Leo looking back, and then the end of the world.
It would have been so much better. It would have been better.
It would, it's interesting. Like, Don't Look Up is a great example of a movie that if you gave that story to 10 different directors, like it'd be just so different. Like if Alfonso Cuarón made it, or, you know, like, or Wes Anderson. I mean, there's like that's a great kind of story. Give it to Adam McKay. If you've seen The Big Short and Vice, you kind of know what you're getting into. Yeah. And I had to I remember when I sat down, like, okay, it's Adam McKay. I got to prepare myself. This is going to just throw things at me. Yeah. And I have to be ready. Yeah. I like parts of the movie. I liked many of those cast members, so I was never bored, but there was something lacking in it. When it got to the end, I wanted to be more emotionally involved in what was happening, and it just felt kind of like they were making fun of what was happening. And I just I was like, I don't know. And then it gets to that last scene with Meryl naked, and I said, what is happening right now?
Then it was like, got to the end of the movie, and it was like, you thought that was bad, it keeps going, and we just fully go off the deep end. I heard someone compare that movie to Wag the Dog, for instance, like that same kind of political satire where it's a little over the top and stuff.
But that movie takes its time. It explores characters in long scenes. It's never just rushing in Wag the Dog, whereas in Don't Look Up, it's like, we got a lot of material to get through in 2.5 hours. Let's go. And I'm like, slow down, movie.
Yes, I know. That's right. I mean, we were 3/4 into the movie before they finally said, don't look up. Right. And that was like a big commentary on disinformation and stuff in our current political system. And I thought that was great. I thought that, what this whole thing is about is a disinformation campaign. And it was weird that they kind of started it off with just these asinine characters making weird sort of extreme selfish jokes for 3/4 of the movie until we finally get to that action time. When I'm sorry, this is not a roast of that movie, but I mean it sort of is interesting to compare with just how they use the same allotted time. I mean, honestly, it's
about the same running time. Shorter.
This movie kind of felt so, it's so sparse plot wise compared to Don't Look Up, but it felt so much more full, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the big problem for me in Don't Look Up is the tonal shifts, and it felt like some actors were in different movies. Like I felt Jennifer Lawrence and DiCaprio were much more grounded and taking this seriously, and Kate Blanchett, and especially Mark Rylance as that crazy gray hair guy, and then even Meryl Streep, who I love, were playing it more comedic, and there was a comedic tone to their performance, they were in an Anchorman, especially Kate
Jonah
Blanchett.
Hill. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then Jennifer Lawrence, when she just gets real and she starts crying on air, and she's like, we're all gonna die and you need to get sad. That was a great scene. Yeah. But it was pulled out of this other style of movie, and it never quite gelled for me. Whereas Solaris tonally is very clear all the way through. I actually felt in many ways it kind of matched the tone of 2001 and the tone of The Shining. It had some of that of that claustrophobia in The Shining when and we're not sure if there's ghosts or not. When the wife comes back and he's not sure, is this real? It for me, it was kind of like, if you're a Kubrick fan, I feel like Solaris has even more than 2001. It also has some of The Shining mixed in, and it's never goes into horror realm, but it's kind of creepy at times too in the middle hour, and it's like, whoa, what's going on here? So I admire that too.
Yeah, I felt that way absolutely. And I thought this movie could easily turn into horror, right? It could easily have just pivoted and it'd been a bloodbath kind of situation, but it didn't. They just stayed very up top about it, and especially the library scene. There's so many things about this movie that are just cuckoo bananas, right? The idea of a spaceship orbiting a space station is what it is, right? Over another planet somewhere out there. And it's got a library with candles in it. Who would ever have fire like this? But they just said, Don't, it's not about that. Don't, it's like that. Don't, no, that's, I think, reinforced by him, the way he travels and stuff. You're just like, who gives a shit? Like, we're not here to sell spaceships. Like, we're just going to get there and we're going to do the scenes, and you're just going to soak in it for a little bit.
There aren't any Solaris toys I can go buy.
Well, Greek head busts, right? You can go get a plaster bust, and that would be a toy of this movie. Yeah.
Like, I can't go to Target right now and get a Solaris action figure.
You can get a globe, right? Right over there. And this, I don't know. Did you mention that? For listeners, I'm currently sitting at the table in my Zoom
so here. If you're only listening, we're seeing Will at the conference table. We see many of the actors from the movie in the library. We see a lot of detail on the walls, and Will's head is a little bit bigger than the actors, but I think that means that he has taken, the initiative to make a speech. Well, what needs to be done.
Well, your interpretation is wholly valid. That's what this movie's about. But what I was going for here was that big naked baby that what's his name Burton saw in the opening of the movie. Is like, I'll just be giant in this scene too, because apparently it's all personal what you see. And Brian, I did want to ask you about this. So we saw Sartorius, right? The scientist that smokes all the time and stuff in the lab coat. He was like, don't come in here, right? When Chris shows up. And that's because he's got his own guest that he doesn't want.
Yeah, I got the set. So when he gets there, there's supposed to be, so I read that it's like 80 plus people, right, are supposed to be there, but it's now down to just 3, and then one of them dies, right?
Right. Yeah.
So he gets there, there's just the 2 other men.
Right.
And are we to think that the other 2 men also have guests of their own?
Well, exactly. And I often thought to myself, is Snout a guest? Right? It's like, is like, is one of the scientists the guest of the other? You know what I mean? Like, I was expecting a twist like that where he gets in an accident and then reappears, and you're like, oh shit, you're actually a guest, right?
Right.
They didn't mess around with any of that, and it seemed like the other scientists didn't have their own guests, aside from that one scene where the dude is trying to keep someone in the room and then like lugs them back in when he half escapes here. But like after that, not much is said about it. It kind of felt like a wasted opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, Tarkovsky, he has a planting and payoff of the beginning and the end, and like setting the scene of where he exists in this other place. So I feel like if he was going to have a scene that set up the idea that there are other guests on the spacecraft, I feel like he would have paid that off later. If it's just suggested, it's like, well, why even bother?
Yeah. And this is something that I just vaguely caught, and then like after reading afterwards, I think I caught the details of it. But it was hard in the middle of the movie to sort of follow the sequence of events. So he meets Hari, she shows up, and he has the whole struggle with trying to figure out whether she's human or not. She grows more human with his love and all that kind of stuff. And then she's like, I'm not real. I'm going to kill myself so that you aren't stuck here on the station. Like my love for you is such that I'll remove myself from the equation so that you can go. There was that whole thing kind of going on there. But oh shoot, I just lost my train of thought. Sorry, Brian.
Well, let me mention, we haven't mentioned her name yet, who plays Hari. I thought she had a great kind of angelic look to her. Natalia Bondarchuk, something like that. Another actor. I mean, had you seen any of the actors in this movie and anything else? Like, she was a new face to me, and she had a great quality that I felt like it suited that role well, because there was kind of like a coldness to her that made it so like, is this real? Is this not? Like, I thought that actress did a really good job with what she had to do in that role. I thought she was really solid too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Did you understand about the cutting of the dress? Like, was she like, do you remember when he was like cutting her out of her?
Oh, right. Like that's pretty early that she's in it, right? He like cuts like a little sliver out of her dress, and then he pulls it kind of. She's
like, I got to get out of this, like, I got to get to a spacesuit kind of thing, and he has to cut it off of her. Is that because that's the only way out of that thing, or is he just going fast?
She forgot to use. She didn't know how to use her hands, so I saw something to do with. Is it she doesn't know a lot because she's like brand new to this space. I don't know. That was weird.
I mean, her memories do slowly come back in the course of it, right? She sort of says like, that's one of her cues that she's not real. She's like, I don't remember anything. But then she does start to remember stuff, like specifically that her mother-in-law didn't like her, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. So they do come back. It's not just like she's a brand new entity with no knowledge of anything. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And she becomes more human. And he's like, I'll just commit to staying here with you forever, kind of thing, right? Like that's what he wants to do, until it becomes clear that she's not going to allow that to happen. The first one that he sticks into the rocket and shoots off, they're like, that's not going to last because she needs to be near you. But eventually she gets to the point where she doesn't need to be near him, right? Mm-hmm.
At first she's really like, he needs to be in the same room with her, and then it gets to a point where she's a little bit more comfortable on her own.
She's able to smoke, do as you do on a space station. Yeah.
Which, recommended on a space station is to smoke.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And then she tries to kill herself and then eventually succeeds because of the Annihilator. And I mean, that's the thing I was trying to circle back to earlier, is that they think, well, let's just shoot Chris's brainwaves at the planet. Right. I mean, that's their conclusion, is like, I don't know why Chris is special. Why wouldn't they use one of their brainwave patterns, right? But they just said, Chris is here, let's hook him up. Yeah. And I couldn't catch in the plot. He at some point hooked his brain up to the thing and bathed the planet with his brainwaves, and that was the planet sort of like, that was the response back to the planet. Planet was like, oh, okay, cool. Like I'm all set. And then they hit it with the X-rays. I'm a little confused. I don't know if you caught that sequence better, but that was like a crucial piece of it. You know what I mean? Of like how that storyline with her wrapped up is that she worked with the scientists for to use the Annihilator to destroy the planet, I guess, the consciousness, the guests, like that whole thing. And his brain waves were sent down to the planet. But I can't remember what the sequence of events were, which order that was in.
He bathed the planet with his brainwaves. That's a funny sentence. Just in general, I really like that.
As you do. They were like, with what? And
we're all gonna have to do that at some point, Will. It might be 20 more years, but
X-rays, brainwaves, just the waves. Yeah.
Maybe that'll have more focus when they remake the movie again in 10 more years, because we get Solaris every 30 years, right? 72. 02 and then 32 will be the next one.
Well, that's how you hold on.
Who do you think will play the main actor in the next one?
You got to hold on to your copyright. I think that's how that works. At this point, it's just going to be Timothy Chalamet.
Who can we get for this big? Chalamet is apparently the only actor under the age of 30.
Yeah, that's right. Well, who knows what child star is coming up here, such that they'll be ready for the.
Why would it be a child star?
Well, I mean, Hollywood.
My wife died 10 years ago.
That's right, Brian.
Jacob Tremblay.
Yeah, that's right. Very good. Yeah, the wife aspect of it. You said she died 10 years before.
That was 10 years before she committed suicide.
So
and did they have a child too?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, is how old are they supposed to be in the logic of the film?
So when we meet them like when she comes back, she has not aged 10 years, right? She still looks like exactly like the day she died 10 years before, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
So if she had come back 10 years older, he might have really been like, no, thanks, get out of my face.
Yeah, that's right.
But she still looks the same 10 years ago. I'm on board.
Yeah.
How old is he in this movie? Like, I didn't look up his age when he shot the film. He looked around 45, maybe.
He was gray. Yeah, that's right.
I loved his gray swoop. That was really at the top of my list on this movie. I really loved the swoop.
I bring it up because of outfits. I thought what everyone was dressed very sharply, and I was trying to figure out what that mesh number that he was wearing when he showed up, and they all wore leather jackets.
Right.
Which I thought was them. I don't know. Are they trying to be? Was that them trying to be cool? Right. Was that? effective that way, or was that just standard issue space stuff? You know, you get your leather.
Where was that scene of them talking about how the leather jackets made them cool? Like that would have been. Could we see Tarkovsky deleting that scene? Maybe he said, you know what, the movie's going a little too long.
Tarkovsky's like, I don't care if you enjoy it, but I enjoy this jacket. It's going in, right?
It's like when Alfred Hitchcock looked at Kim Novak before shooting Vertigo, and he said, you are wearing this gray suit.
That's right.
And she was like, really? And he's like, yes. And that, of course, that is like an iconic piece of clothing from that movie. Sometimes the actors are like, I don't know about this, but sometimes you just have to go with the director's vision. I thought the clothing worked pretty well. Like for me, like if they had worn something that had taken me out of the movie and have been like, oh, they're trying to make this look like it's the year 3600 or something, that would have been too much.
Like a holodeck from Star Trek or something. The library is way out of place. It does not belong on this space station. And clearly the paintings in the background are meant to be this kind of like memory hallway of Earth and the place, the roots and those kinds of things, and all the different aspects of human knowledge that have brought them to, you know, the globe and thought. And I mean, a lot of these are like philosopher busts and stuff. So they're all just sort of like symbolism for the core messages of what's going on in the movie. But their clothes just seemed like, to reinforce my earlier point, just you come over here, you're in the movie now, except for him coming on board with that mesh net deal with the leather jacket. It felt like such an odd choice because it presented as not functional nor necessarily fashionable. So don't know where that one came from.
We do get one really cool visual effect in the middle part of the movie, maybe towards the end of the movie, of them floating in the air. That was cool. I was like, ooh, how did they do that in 71? It looked really good.
Yes, it did. Yeah, that was pretty cool. Yeah, they had the candles floating up, right? And you're like, whoa, what's going on here? And then
Tarkovsky was like, I'm gonna show them this is not just an intimate drama of no effects of any kind. We are going after that Oscar for visual effects. It's gonna happen.
Isn't there another? I feel like there's another movie that I can't come up with that does that kind of, in the middle of the movie, we're just going to have a wacky thing happen to just, like all rules are off, where it's like a dream sequence kind of thing, but not a dream, where people are kind of floating in air or
I mean, I'm thinking floating person. My brain went to Ghostbusters when Sigourney Weaver is like going up to the ceiling and Bill Murray's like, huh?
Right. Yeah.
He's cracking jokes about it. He's like, did you okay?
Yeah. No, I really appreciated the I don't know who was it, Fellini, or I don't know, just
did Fellini do
kind
a
of
crazy
thing.
Nightmare sequence?
No, I think that one of his sort of like philosophies about making movies was just like, these are dreams, like that we're watching anyway. Movies are dreams, so lean into it, right? And play with the tools available in this format, and being able to convey meaning through things that are just kind of more dreamy and not grounded in stuff is a powerful way to leverage ideas. And I think that this movie does that effectively, especially in that, but throughout kind of that technique.
Yeah, well, I think you need the science fiction aspect of this. We're set on Earth, and it was a very just stark kind of drama about these two people, and they started floating 2 hours in. I'd be like, Fellini.
I don't know. I really appreciate when a movie sort of throws off the trappings of its format or its genre or whatever, and just like goes unexpected or does something weird, and you're like, finally a breath of fresh air.
Pull a From Dusk Till Dawn and just become a vampire action movie, like when it's been like a Pulp Fiction type of thing. But I mean, I think because of the wife coming back from the dead in a way, I think you have the capabilities to play with time and space, and whereas other movies might be trickier if you're,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's
2 hours into Saving Private Ryan and they start to float in the air. Then the audience kind of.
I would be tickled, Brian. I would be so tickled. That would be really
Tom
cool.
Hanks started, like, if he just, like, you see Tom Hanks, we know it's a dream. Tom Hanks lays down and he closes his eyes, and then he's like floating in the air and doing a little dance.
No, it's even better if we don't know it's dreaming, right? It just happens. no one says anything. It just happens.
If they say,
I mean, man, you'd walk in a theater going, what was that? It'd really stick with you.
2 hours in, and they turn to Tom Hanks and they say, we're just really lucky to have you here. You're like a father figure to all of us. And he says,
yeah, that's how they make movies, Brian. They go like, you know what? We were rewriting it on our lunch break.
And then you just see him, he just starts floating in the air, and then he's going towards the moon, and you hear him go, bye. Like, I don't think the movie would have done as well with audiences and critics. Like, I think people would be talking about the opening 15-minute amazing sequence, but I think like at least a paragraph would have been a part of the reviews for the scene where Tom Hanks mysteriously just starts floating in the air.
If you're Tarkovsky, you don't care and you don't read those reviews. So
you don't think Tarkovsky was looking at all the reviews of his movie?
I doubt it.
Like back in 72, like, where is my version of Rotten Tomato?
If he did, they probably made him mad. I doubt he would indulge in that. Yeah.
He had to wait a long time to hear the US critics. I mean, it made its premiere in October 1976 at the Ziegfeld Theater in New York City. So that's when all the major US critics were starting to see it and saying so if he was interested in what they had to say, he had to wait a long time. So I think by 76, he was probably off in his next film, or even like another film after the last one. I don't think he was that concerned.
Yeah. He was like,
but he got to make more movies. I mean, it's not like this came out and then that was it. Like the movie did well enough, at least like internationally, to allow him to make more.
Well, I don't understand how the financing worked back then, but I think I know that in his other film, Stalker, they had to make that movie twice. Like, he made that movie once, and then the film got destroyed, and he had to make it all over again. And it's already such a bonkers movie. The idea that you get to make a bonkers movie twice, the exact same one, back to back, and how hard it was, certainly telegraphs that there's some money somewhere, some desire somewhere for some trippy-ass, movies.
That happened occasionally. Woody Allen made a movie called September in 1986, I want to say. He made the whole movie, cut the whole movie together, watched it, said, I don't like this. I'm gonna redo it with a new cast. And he hired a new cast, and he made the movie again. And then there's the classic tale of Wes Craven, who made his movie Cursed from 2005, the horror werewolf movie. He made that apparently about 4 times before it finally came out and bombed and nobody liked.
I wouldn't do that.
You wouldn't make a movie 4 times? Give it another go. You can try again.
Yeah.
Get it right.
It's like Avatar, right? We're still waiting on the sequels. I imagine he's probably made those films 30 times by now. The 3 or 4 sequels that he's promised, probably CGI made them 4 or 5 times at this point already. And
so I actually just read a piece in Entertainment Weekly about Avatar 2. I guess they've shot 2 and 3, but they have not shot 4 and 5. I thought he was making like all 4 sequels at the same time. It looks like they haven't actually filmed 4 and 5 yet. Because what I would love would be, no shade on Cameron, but it would be really fun to, like, they have Avatar 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the can.
Yeah.
And Avatar 2 comes out and underperforms. What do you do with the other 3?
You release them all the same day. Our grandchildren can go watch them. I can't fathom what's going on there, aside from him just going like, this is my illegal money laundering scheme. It works very well, and I'm just going to keep it going, and no one will think sideways, because they'll go like, why would James Cameron have an elaborate money laundering scheme called Avatar?
Yeah, speaking of a great, science fiction director, I mean, I give him shade a little bit for Avatar and something, but like Aliens is just an amazing movie, and he was a director. He played with so many cool ideas in his films, like T2 and The Abyss.
Yeah.
And I've been so disappointed to see him just after Titanic basically just make one movie.
Something about the year 2000. Yeah. Something about the year 2000 cursed him, Will Smith, Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg, right? Like all the 90s greats just showed up after 2000 and went like, the spell, it's gone. Like the Cinderella magic is gone. They're like, oh no, what am I gonna do? And they keep
at least those others keep trying and keep pumping out work year to year. Yeah. Whereas Cameron, it's like, really, like, you're in your 60s, you have maybe 15 more years in you. and you're just going to make Avatar sequels. That's it. You're not going to, like, how cool would it be for James Cameron to spend 1 year and make like a smaller, like, science fiction movie? Like, he just like in and out, like, in a year. Like, that would be really cool.
When you become a cinema god, you don't want to play with the little blocks anymore.
The little block.
The only thing exciting to you is 20 years in your holodeck creating avatars.
But the same thing happened to George Lucas. Like, Star Wars was so big, and I don't think he ever really liked directing that much. Like, that was not his love, was directing films. So when Star Wars hit, like, he never directed another movie that wasn't Star Wars after 77. Right. And I always think about, like, American Graffiti is so great. And I didn't love THX 1138, which we talked about last year on the podcast, but there were some really cool ideas in that movie. I would have loved to have seen maybe 1 or 2 more films of his from the 80s and 90s where he played with, you know, something a little bit smaller, you know, lower tech. These guys get to such a status that, as you mentioned, like, James Cameron can't go back to the Terminator 84. He has to do $800 million Avatar, or nothing else.
That's right.
I guess it's better than nothing, but I don't know.
At least it's making space for new voices, right? We don't need the same folks in there doing the same old rote stuff. There's plenty of good talent coming up. So
maybe James Cameron, when he's done with Avatar 5 in 2029 or 30, maybe then he can do the next remake of Solaris for 30.
Right, he'll be available. We should pitch it to him. Now, you know, one last serious point here, as I feel like you're going to transition here in a minute. I think the magic of the sci-fi stuff, because you were asking me before the podcast sort of come up with a list here of, you know, some of my favorite sci-fi movies. They are all pretty much from the 70s. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't really, I wasn't all that conscious of it, but when I, you know, went to pull up a list here, they're all in the 70s. And I think the reason that is because there was just this happy medium there of the technology not being quite there, you know, to be able to do the kind of thing now. And so they were forced to do a lot of
practical,
rather goofy stuff. I mean, practical, but it comes across as goofy. But one of the ways to compensate for that, I think, is to do it inside the audience's head, right? Rather than like on screen. And to me, that's the most exciting thing, is to like watch something, and it's a trick to put something up there and say, ooh, you don't know what it is, right? And have the audience lean forward and go, I want to know what it is. Because you could easily just be like, okay, I don't know what it is and I don't like it, right? So there's like it's really special when that happens, but when the allure is strong enough and the idea is compelling enough, and they sort of say like, there's an answer, you just can't quite see it, it's just over here, you know, you really like are soaking in every detail to do the trigonometry to figure out what is the answer behind there, and that kind of activity is really exciting to me, and I don't really find it in many other things.
I mean, wrapping up our thoughts on Solaris, I admired the movie more than I really enjoyed it, but it's definitely like science fiction films of the 70s is definitely my jam, and I like these kind of quieter character studies more than I do like action movies, science fiction. So in that regard, I was really taken with a lot of it, and it's definitely worth a look. If you're a fan of the genre, if you've never seen the original 72 Solaris, you should definitely check it out. All right, so that takes us to our final 2 segments. The first one's the Divine Double Feature. This nearly 3-hour movie ends, Will. What do you recommend someone put on right after? Something a little bit newer that maybe plays in the same genre or similar ideas? Like, what would you recommend someone watch now?
Well, for the next 5 hours, so just make it a full day event.
Yep.
I thought the clever answer to this would be Moon, right? Because you've got Solaris and Moon.
Sam Rockwell.
And I mean, it kind of deals with the same kinds of existential, who am I? I'm a clone, he's a clone and all those kinds of things. But I more compelling to me was the Channel Zero No End House. Did you ever see that TV show?
No, what is that?
So that was I think a sci-fi channel show. It was I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, or maybe more actually. And it was a horror film, right? So or series. They're kind of one of those anthology series, right, where it changes up every season, kind of thing. So that this particular season was about a haunted house, and when you go into the haunted house, you go through a series of rooms. It's very scary, very dangerous, and then you come out. But the trick is you don't actually come out. You come out into inside the house, right? So your whole neighborhood is still there. Everything's there. The world's still there, except you're inside the house. And I think the reason I thought of this was because the monster, the big bad of the show, was this kind of force that could replicate people from your memories. And so the people that would go in would end up seeing their loved ones, especially ones that have passed, right? And that's kind of same connective tissue here. And this girl goes in, and it's like her dad, I believe her dad died, and she goes in, her dad's there, and so she really loves him. And the thing is, he is conscious too. He becomes aware of his nature, as well as being like, it's not really me. The twist, though, that makes it a horror here that they don't do in this movie is that he has to eat. Like, he has to eat people, right, to stay alive. And so she kind of ends up luring other people into the haunted house so that he can eat them and stay alive. And so she
sounds
can still,
interesting.
yeah, she can still have her father. But then she has to reckon with the fact that this isn't her father, and she's murdering folks and all that. So it's an anthology, it's many episodes, and it kind of gets to do that slow character build, and still with this fun twist that's pretty identical to this one. I loved that one so much, and I think it'd be great.
It's how many episodes long?
I should have looked it up. I don't know.
5?
It's a short season, so it's not terribly long. But
and where is that streaming? Is that on streamers or something?
Great question. I don't know. Like I said, it's an older one. You should be able to find it easy.
Okay.
I can Google it right now, or literally you can just Google
it.
Yeah.
So what's the title of it one more time?
No End House. It was on Channel Zero. The Channel Zero is kind of the name of the show, and No End House was the name of the season.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Check that out. Sounds really cool.
Yeah.
So I went with my favorite science fiction movie of the last decade, Ex Machina. Did you see that?
Yeah.
That movie is just like stunning. And it kind of reminded me watching Solaris. It has that kind of quiet intensity, and it's really about the characters, but Ex Machina really pushes the genre forward in doing really cool things, not just with visual effects, but also with like these thematic ideas of like, what is a robot? What are they capable of? How much humanity should we give them? And that's been played with in a lot of novels and films throughout the years. But I thought Alex Garland really did a great job with that. And the performances are amazing. And I just think it'd be like it's really about place and relationships. Like I think that would be a really neat one to watch right after Solaris too.
Now, that was the same director who did the TV show Devs, right?
Was it? It's the director. He directed Annihilation with Natalie Portman, and then I believe he directed a series after Annihilation. It might be the one you're talking about. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah,
I've seen his 2 movies. He started as a novelist.
It's Alex Garland. Yeah,
Alex Garland.
Yeah.
He started as a novelist. He wrote The Beach, which became the movie with DiCaprio, and then he kind of transitioned into screenwriting, and then he started directing. And Ex Machina was his first one, and that was the one movie of 2015 that just knocked my socks off. I walked out. And that was incredible.
I enjoyed that film too, though. My one feeling here is to go back to my point earlier about not expecting the twist ending of this movie. That one you kind of do, like, you kind of see it coming the whole time. You like know that it's gonna get out, and they're trying.
She's gonna get out.
Yeah, like they're fruitlessly trying to keep it in, and you kind of understand that there's no way to keep the lid on this machine now that it's open, kind of thing. And I, even though you know that's where it's going, and it's satisfying in its execution and stuff, for some reason, satisfying. The capping it off kind of feels like, well, there it is. Kind of, it doesn't feel that kind of like, whoa, like it. Like expands your mind kind of thing of that, but whereas this one, when you watch it, I didn't see it coming, and then it happens, and I go like, more food for thought. Very cool. I'll keep thinking on this,
That's true. Yeah, right. Like I can't remember. It's been a while. Did I halfway through Ex Machina, did I already see the ending coming? I mean, maybe I did, but it's so satisfying. That last shot of her surrounded by people in the real world and her walking off, I just found so chilling and so memorable. I still haven't forgotten that last shot. So I don't know. I think, looking back on the last 10 years of science fiction, there's not a whole lot of movies I love. And that was one that was definitely high up there. So I'd recommend that.
Yeah.
Our final segment, Beyond the Flick. We could have talked about the career of Tarkovsky, but I haven't seen any of his other movies. So I don't know what I would say about that. So I don't think I've ever done a segment yet. We're 17 months into this podcast. I don't think I've ever done a segment just on science fiction movies in general. So you're going to Solaris, and you're only allowed to take 3 science fiction movies with you, Will. What do you take? 3 movies.
Oh, this is like a desert island question.
Yeah. So So like if it's only 3 science fiction movies you could watch for the rest of your life, what are the 3 you take with you?
Wow. I think that if you were asking this about any other genre, you could easily answer and it just sort of feel a fun, cute thing. But like with a sci-fi element, especially like what does it mean to be human and all that kind of stuff, the idea of sitting with 3 movies, I want to interrogate that notion just to begin with. Like, oh, how would I even make a choice? It would just be soul shattering, no matter how good they are, to be stuck on a space station with only 3 movies. But ignoring all of that crisis stuff, I think I would enjoy. You said THX 1138. I was like, I didn't add that one to my list. I should definitely have added that to my list. I had 2001: A Space Odyssey, Planet of the Apes. If I could have all of them, please. Like I would enjoy that, but I realize it's sort of cheating a little bit here. Dark Star was a fun.
By John Carpenter.
Yeah, man. I know it's so goofy and dumb, but in some ways, but I really enjoy the feel of it, the look of it. It's so low
that was a student film,
right?
That it was a 50-minute student film, and it was long enough that they said we're going to add on to this and actually release it to theaters, and audiences did not go for Dark Star when it came out. But it's really developed a cult following. It's a really interesting debut for Carpenter when you look at his career. Like many people kind of think of Assault on Precinct 13, his second film, as kind of the real big debut for him as a director. But Dark Star, there's a lot of really cool things happening in that movie. I'm glad you brought it up. Very cool.
Yeah. And well, I mean, and that's just the hard sci-fi, right? THX 1138, those kinds of things. Yeah. I think that would be my list in there somewhere.
Yeah. No, I would agree. I think you have to take 2001. I just think that movie, I've seen it 5 or 6 times, like especially on the big screen. There's nothing like it. I mean, almost nothing like that movie on the big screen. It's like it's just amazing. It's so great. And I'm glad you mentioned Planet of the Apes. I was like almost scared to mention it. I'm like, oh, Will's gonna think that's too goofy of a movie. I love the original Charlton Heston.
Yes.
I love the slow burn opening. You don't know where they are, and then all the ideas that movie plays with. And as I said, the ending that's kind of similar to Solaris, we're ending where we started, and that's really cool. Yeah. I would add Alien. I think from '79 is. I don't know if I'd want to watch that over and over because it's very bleak. The same with my other choice from 2006, Children of Men by Alfonso Cuarón. I believe we saw that together. Didn't we see that in a group?
I think we did.
That came out in 06. And I was a big fan of that director. He'd only made a couple things before, not too many things, but I still remember to this day, we all walked out and we all looked at each other and we were all blown away by Children of Men. That was a really great film. Yeah. And I've seen it a couple times since. It's not an easy watch by any means.
No.
But in thinking of my favorite science fiction movies ever, that's definitely up there.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, if you if you consider like Back to the Future a science fiction movie, which I kind of do. I mean, I don't know. What do you call that movie? It's kind of a mix of every genre in a way. It's got comedy. It's got fantasy and drama and family. I don't know. Like, I don't really think of science fiction as Back to the Future, even though it definitely is. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. You kind of have to throw up arbitrary lines to start boxing things in because there are so many overlaps and stuff. I mean, the truth is, I think that there was a great era of, not to say that not many good sci-fi have come out lately, though I think that's probably personally true. There's a really great era, 70s all the way up through 2000 stuff where you get some really cool things happening in sci-fi. And after that, I don't know, it peters off for me, and I'm tempted. I haven't interrogated that thought too hard because I think to myself, maybe it's just me getting older and like your childhood is always the best thing in the world, and I don't want to be guilty of sort of that kind of narrow thinking. But there's been fewer and fewer things that sort of knock my socks off in movies, but in television, right? That's the place where I feel like sci-fi has gone and done really cool things. I mean, I mentioned the No End Houses being one of my favorite, but the stuff that is like on Apple TV and stuff with the For All Mankind or whatever, like fun things like that, where you can really explore stuff over time and sit with it. Because I feel like that's a key ingredient of hard sci-fi that makes it not just like turn this that way and then this happens and there's a monster and boom and then we're done. You know what I mean? Like to squeeze it into a movie, the formula these days is like it sucks out all of the opportunity and availability for deeper thought or meditating on things and enjoying it. And sci-fi, that's the one thing that this sci-fi really does really well. But on television, it can do that, and they still do it pretty well. Something like Foundations. I don't know if you've been watching that.
There's a couple Apple TV shows that are science fiction, right? Isn't that one of them?
Yeah.
I haven't seen them yet.
That was less successful to me and feels more like an attempt to be like a Game of Thrones, where it's more in palace intrigue type of stuff versus existential stuff. lob it in there, and it doesn't work as well. But TV is kind of the place for these interesting little sci-fi things, and there's just so much money for television these days, so many platforms for them, that it seems like really weird concepts can kind of get off the ground and happen. So
and science fiction it's here in a lot of television. It's also here in movies. The Matrix, there's a new Matrix movie.
Oh no. Brought up that. Well, what's your take on that? I'd love to hear your take on the new Matrix movie.
It was rough. Yeah, I watched it. I was like, what is happening? Why like it didn't really, it felt like a movie that didn't need to exist in any way. It felt like the director, like Warner Brothers, was like every 6 months checking in, like, hey, can you make another one? Can you? And then finally, okay, here.
Yeah. Well, there was a half minute, like a half minute in that movie where when they were getting real meta, like they aimed the cannon at the metaverse and they just started heading right towards Warner Brothers wants to make a new game, based on the Matrix and stuff. Like I was going, okay, like we're going to get wacky. And then they just said, and cue 50 fight scenes and then the end, right? Like there was a mark in the movie where they just abandoned any attempt to be weird and off the wall. And
meta.
The whole thing, they started up in the beginning going like, hey, we're back. We can't replicate the greatness of the past, so we're not even going to try. We're clearly here because Warner Brothers is going to do it with or without us. So we said we might as well do it.
Yeah.
And so let's just get right to it. And you're just like, no, what you were going to like do, you know what I mean? You were going to do something there. Instead, they just dove off and get into these like very poor action sequences, like Keanu not being able to fly, her having a family, them being separated. There was something in there. Do you know what I mean? It's just that they lost track of it totally to what was, I don't know, seemed clear.
I feel like that's happening more and more these days. There's a nugget in there that's really interesting, but then surrounding it is the studio. Well, no, you need an hour of action.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. They've got a quota, and it's like, well, this is the Matrix. We got to sell, toys and stuff. So get to it.
Yeah. And then Dune. Do we consider that science fiction, or is that more fantasy? Dune.
That's a great question. I'm sure there's a lot of opinions out there on that one. I don't know. To me, it felt more fantasy, and like my senses just kind of were like, we're going mystical and prophecy and all that kind of stuff. So it felt a little bit like that. But I was interested in the way that they intentionally didn't show the cockpits of the spaceship and sort of stayed away from the technology. And in a way, that's sort of like hard sci-fi, right? Because we're usually really interested, like this is a whatever drive and this is how we do it kind of thing. But I was really happy that we didn't even try. They just said there's spaceship and we just got here. And like, that's fine for me. I don't want to get lost in the weeds on something that could possibly be boring. But I think they did that in this case, Dune, in order to get into the kind of like spice high fantasy, sci-fi. I mean, fantasy kind of dream thing.
So these science fiction fantasy films are here to stay. I'm excited to watch more on television as well. And what's so cool, kind of like with the horror genre, looking at films over the decades, you can kind of see what's the vibe of cinema at this time, looking at a genre in the 50s. Like think of the 50s science fiction movies, right? All the crazy flying saucer alien movies of that decade. And then you look at the 70s, you said, most of your favorite science fiction movies are of this decade.
Yeah.
So many great ones to get to. Lots of both kind of goofy ones coming up and also more similar in tone to Solaris. Really excited to talk about. So thanks for being here, Will, again for the third time.
Absolutely.
I got you a better movie, right?
No, this was an enjoyable watch. No, I mean enjoyable in a different way. I did actually enjoy watching those other movies. I never would have watched them
the
otherwise.
Barefoot Executive.
No, that was fun to sort of rip apart, and this one was fun for a different reason. So it's fun all the way down. Yeah.
So thanks for being here, Will. This was such a treat to see you again and talk to you about this movie. Hope to have you back many times to come. Do you have anything you'd like to promote or tell our listeners where they can find you online?
I'm still an intensely private person and I have nothing to promote. I'll let you know if that changes though.
If that ever changes, Will, let me know.
All right.
So thanks for being here. Thanks to all of you for listening. You can find us online at filmat50.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And check out my new YouTube channel, Brian Rowe Video, talking about Oscar movie history and some pieces on my favorite films and actors. It's at Brian Rowe Video on YouTube. And until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.